Today we're going to create a fully dynamic input stepper that will be able to store the data, and you will be able to work with that data as either a query parameter or as a database request. As well, if I, for example, even manually type in 13, I can go up all the way to 25, and the same thing with going to 100, I can go down to 99. And this works fully dynamically for this rendered list of items. And yeah, it is exactly what you need right now if you're watching this video. And it is working wonderful and in real time without any delay because we're using Embed 2. So let's get started with the setup because it is way simpler than you think it is. It's only 5 actions and you could even do it in less, but let's get started right to it. So let's start with the Webflow build. It's very simple. We already have this rendered list. If you want to go back to the first video I made on skeleton loaders, I will be walking more in detail on the setup. But just so that you know, we have the item name and we're just rendering this dynamically as well. We are rendering a list dynamically for the main list content, and we have Wized Cloak applied to that. If you are interested in how the skeleton loader works, this one right here, I highly suggest you to go to the first video I made on that, and I will be also linking that down in the video description. But yeah, let's get into the stepper. So we just have a holder right here that is just under the image. And now here's where it gets funky, or interesting at least. I'm not using a form element. Yeah, love me or hate me for that. I'm not using a form element. I'm just using a div block. And we have in this div block another div block called stepper. And we have a custom element set as input and added the WEL attribute for step count. So we are avoiding needing the need for a form field, a form block, by using a custom element. And to be responsive and accessible, we are having another custom element for the plus and minus, or for the plus and minus buttons. That is actually a custom element with a tag of button applied to it. Again, and the Wized attribute, WEL, plus step for plus, and minus step for minus. Yeah, and then we have the cart button, again, as a custom element applied with button, and we're going to add WEL, add to cart. That's our setup. So you may ask yourself, why am I using custom components? I tried making this with a form, but I just don't like the way the setup is being built because it is not really a form. It is an action that occurs on button click, and it is a somewhat of a variable in an input field that just determines some sort of data. So that's why I went with that. You may rebuild that yourself and use the form, but I just went with this system in here because I think that's the way to do it. But you're free to update that. You can just copy it out and add a form element in here and add that information in the form and change the setup a bit and add a form button like this. This would work too. Yeah, but for now we are just keeping the setup like this. Okay, so let's get back to Wized. And as well, I need more excuses to use the custom element as well. So what's going on right here in Wized is, first of all, we have our wonderful skeleton video from the first, skeleton loader from the first video, that way around. And yeah, so let's just go through the setup. We have the submit form, and actually I have to change it because it's not a form anymore. It is add to cart. We have this applied to the add to cart attribute, and we have an action on click. We're preventing default just to make sure. And what we're doing is we are navigating to a URL and we're going to apply a query parameter. By the way, if you want to go deeper into query parameters, I highly suggest the video about query parameters I just made yesterday. And we're adding the variable from the rendered list, the one that comes from this data right here, to the query parameter, as well as the count. Right now, this will just say Wanda, the first item, and 0. This is not important right now, but I just wanted to emphasize on this from the beginning so that you can keep this in the back of your head. Excuse me. And yeah, let's go into the input field. This is very important. We want to start out at 0 for everything. So we're going to set the input value for all step counters as number and then equals, it's number and then the string 0. Why are we going to use this setup? Just to make sure that it is not a string 0 and that it is a number 0, because there is a difference between this 0 right here. Actually, let me remove the return so this 0 and this 0. Those are two different zeros. This is a text 0, this is a number 0. So we're just making sure that we are actually having a 0 as a number and not as a text, because then we cannot do calculations. We cannot calculate with letters. We can only calculate with numbers. And then let's go to the logic part. This is where it gets really funny. So we have this minus step, this one right here. And on event, let's add a plus and then we can add a minus, right? This is this minus step here. And on click, you don't see this here because it's hidden, but it's this one because it's rendered dynamically. So it's this one, the minus one. And on click, we run a very simple function. Very simple. If the current count is greater than 0, we're going to, we're returning, we do return, and then we do this variable, this one right here, this input field, and we're setting it as equal. We're setting the current state of it, which is 0, and we're doing minus 1. You could do it like this, that would be best practices, but just to simplify it for a lot of the viewers here, I just formatted it like this, so you know exactly, oh, this is the action doing +1, this is the action doing -1. And yeah, right now there's nothing in there, but this is which will do the logic of adding a minus or removing one count. Like this one, let's say we're at 7, and I will click this action. What this action will be doing is, first it will be again evaluating, is this number 7 bigger than 0? It is, yes, greater than 0. And then I'm going to get this input field, and I will set this input field as the value that is in this input field -1. So 6. If I were to click here, it would set it to 6. This is what this function does. And yeah, you could do the conditional in here. I just did it in here just to have it in one line. And yeah, we have the same thing in here for the add one step, for the +1. We're just on event, click, and we're doing this run function just without an if statement, because we can always add +1. If it's 0, we want to add +1, right? So we have that in here. So the same process. We're taking the variable, this one, in this input field. It's not really a variable. I just still consider it as a variable because it is variable, because it is saving data, equals whatever is in here. Whatever is in here +1. So we're taking 6 plus 1. That is the thing that's going on here. And now we have some JavaScript to prevent, let's say I were to try to put a K in here or any letter. It will not allow that. It will still say a 0, right? It will still have a null value. And why are we going to do that? Because we don't want people to make a submission for hi or hello or whatever, or minus 500. We don't want to go into the negative normally. So on event, so first of all, on this input applied right here, this is called step count. We're going to have an on event action of input. This is the moment I input something, this action runs, right? The moment I do any change on this field. And then we're going to run a function. And this code was human-made, so please excuse any typos. So very simple. This may sound intimidating. Let me just walk you through this in detail. So we have the const. We're defining a number. So we're telling the code is saying, my number. We just create a new value called my number. It's not in here. This is within this code. We're saying, we have this thing called my number. And yeah, my number is just my number, right? But what is my number? My number needs to equal something. So we're telling it with this equal sign, my number equals the step count item, this one. Oh, didn't want to add that, but it's this one. So this equals the step count. So this, my number, will equal, let me just do something visually for you. This, my number, will equal 7. This, my number, will equal 1. This, my number, will equal 4. And this, my number, will equal 13, right? Every of those items has their own my number, because it's their number. And this code runs in all of them. So each one of those has their own my number. That's what this part is, this line is doing. Then we're doing an if statement. If this number that is in here, so if this here, which is right now 1 for Timmy, if this is greater than 0, which it is because it is 1 right now, as you can see, if this is greater than 0, we are going to return whatever is in this item. So actually, we're going to return, and in this return statement, we are setting this input field here. So we're setting this input field here. This is this input field, in this case 7, 4, and so on. And we're setting this as my number, which is the thing you just inputted. But when we input this number, it will be a string. Let's say I put a 23 in here. Now this will be a string, so I cannot add a plus. It will do 23 plus 1, so it would do 231, which is an issue because we're just adding a 1 at the end. So whenever we're inputting any number, which gets originally natively by Webflow inputted as a string, as text, the moment we input it, we need to change this text to a number. So we're going to put the string 5 into the number 5 in this case, for example. So this is what this line is doing right here. And we're doing number, and then we're doing my number. So we're putting my number, which is the input. If I were to input 5, my number would be string 5. And we're using the number operator to turn string 5 into number 5. And we're returning number 5 as the input of this input value. So it's kind of like an interesting thing. Think of it like this. The moment I input 5, the form has a string 5 in it and immediately turns the string 5 into number 5, well, by updating the field after I add something to the field. So I add a 5, and it's getting to the code very quick, turning the 5 into number 5 and putting it back in. And you don't see anything going on because it's so fast. But this is what this code is doing. And then we're having an else operator. So if anything else happens, we just want, so for example, if I input a string, or if I input any letter, caps or whatever, if I input any crazy thing from my keyboard, we're just going to set this input as null. So in this case, for example, if I were to try to put any letter, it will just set it as null. But if I put a 7, it will say a 7. If I were to put -7, it will just do 7, because minus is not recognized by it. Yeah, like this is what's going on here. And this code may seem intimidating. It is not. It's not much code. It's rather easy to understand, and you also have some easy instructions on the side to understand what this code is doing. Yeah, I think this is a low-code project, not a no-code project, but I hope that I could walk you through as detailed as possible how this is working, and it's working magnificent. And now if I were to click on Add to Cart, you would see that I have the name, Wanda, and count 13, which I added in there. We have this example action just to do that, because when we are clicking on there, we have this data, right? We have this data in the input. If you want to build a shopping cart, you may want to send that data to Stripe's API. You may want to send that data to Xano. You may want to send that data to Airtable. I'm not a fan of Airtable, so that's why I'm saying Airtable. So you may want to send that to Airtable too, if you really want to. But yeah, you need to do something with the data. Right? You need to do something with the data, otherwise it will just look pretty in there and don't have any utility. So I just created this example action to show you what you could do with the data. You could just have name and parameter name, and so think of it like this. We are just setting this information from a query parameter. So if we were to go into this system action in here on the add to cart, if we go one step back right here, we have this add to cart, and on click right here, if I click on here, so let's add a 13 in here, and yeah, we are navigating to a URL, to this one, and we're adding a query parameter for name, as I already mentioned earlier, and we are adding the variable with the iterator from the rendered list for the name. In this case, this would be the first one for Wanda, so we're adding this one in here, and then we're adding an and we don't need to do a separate question mark, we just do an and, we do another query parameter for count, and we're going to set the value, the iterative value. So this one is Wanda, 0, and Wanda has 13, which is 0, 2. So we're getting the iterated item for 13 as well, and we're putting it in here, and we have Wanda 13. And on click, we're setting this as a query parameter and navigating to the page like this. And then we have this example action, which will just display this data as name. We'll take it from the query parameter Wanda, and it will take the count, which we just set as text, in here as well. This is the text, and we're just setting this in here. That's the magic. That's what's going on. It's a more detailed project. It's more of the complex builds, but it is rather simple if you know what you're doing and once you get the understanding of it. So I hope that this little project will help improve your understanding of code better, and maybe that's the furthest you will go into code as a no-code developer. But the nice thing about that is once you get this your toe a little bit into code, you will be a low-code developer, and you will have way faster times to market, and you can ship faster your project. So don't rely too much on things like FinSuite attributes, because those are external solutions. I'm not saying that FinSuite attributes is not a great solution. It's a wonderful solution. But I always highly encourage it. Build it yourself so you are in control of it. Your client, if it's for a client, has the control of it as well, and you're not reliable on somebody else's solution because they may stop providing support for that. And if you have that on your own Wized project, you're way safer and way more secure, and you are building something that will work for the future all the time ahead. So thank you so much for your time. This was a bit longer tutorial, but I hope that I could get in as much detail as I needed to make this code and this logic that is going on in here as understandable as possible. And as always, if you have any questions, please put them down in the comments, and I will be more than happy to respond to them as soon as possible. And yeah, thank you so much for your time, and happy developing. Bye-bye.